Welcome back. I'm Cole Coffin, and while looking for stories for the next deep dive, I stumbled upon an almost 9-year-old series of posts that were originally uploaded by the Reddit user Helen on Earth. While these could have easily been included in a regular deep dive video, I felt that this story deserved its own dive. So, let's dive in. This story starts on July 20th of 2015, when Helen on Earth went onto the Let's Not Meet subreddit and uploaded her first post. These posts are verified by the Let's Not Meet moderators, meaning that the OP has provided some evidence to validate their story. That being said, this is Reddit, and despite the strictness of the Let's Not Meet moderator team, a verified tag is not a golden seal of legitimacy, so take it with a grain of salt. These posts are titled, Neighbors Lurking in the Dark, and the first post goes like this. Okay, so I've had a few issues with my next door neighbors since I moved in, but nothing creepy until just recently. There's a man, a woman, and at least one boy living in there. I mostly just avoid them. The man seems okay, but a bit weird, and the boy just keeps to himself. The woman is quite off. Not long after we moved in, she left a note in my mailbox. Our mailboxes are right beside each other, between our houses. Anyway, I stood at the mailbox reading the note. She thought that my dog was pooping in her yard. It was possible, as our fence had some holes in it that our dog had gotten out of, but those holes had been fixed a long time ago. Still, no big deal, except I noticed her standing in her driveway, just staring at me. And the note was very long. I kept reading it, and the more I read, the crazier it got, and the weirder her behavior in my peripheral vision became. Apparently I was entitled. She seemed to think I was somehow instructing my dog to poop in their yard. Her note went on a tangent about how awful dogs are. She was 100% convinced it was my dog, even though there are tons of loose dogs, cats, and wildlife wandering around, and no doubt traveling through her unfenced backyard. In my peripheral vision, she got into her SUV, backed out of her driveway, and then parked it along the street directly behind me, and just idled there, staring. The note went on a weird and long tirade about the previous family to live in the house, saying I was Aunt or Deb, as if I'd have any idea what that was even supposed to mean, then concluded in some odd insults and some implied not quite threats. This was the closest thing we had ever had to a conversation at this point. I can understand not wanting a dog to poop in her yard, but this was a bit extreme of a reaction, as this literally was the first time I'd even heard of there being a problem. A simple note would have done, but this note was insane. She was still staring behind me. I decided to try to ignore her and just go to my house. That's when she shouted out her window. "Are you playing a game?" That reaction made no sense. "Are you nuts?" I replied, as I officially ran out of patience. She shouted more nonsense and insults at me while blocking my driveway with her vehicle. I repeatedly told her to leave before I called the cops. This went back and forth like that for a while, but she eventually sped off when I pulled my cell out. Later, my boyfriend, who had not been home at the time this happened, had a chat with the neighbors. He said they seemed agreeable and reasonable, and basically dismissed me as just being dramatic. The woman told a very different version of events, of course. I was annoyed that my boyfriend wasn't taking me seriously, but let it go. I think he just wanted to keep getting along with the man next door, as they sometimes borrowed tools. They speak to him a lot differently than how they speak to me, and they don't do anything rude to me while he's around. In fact, they don't speak to me when he's around at all. They always wait for him to be away. Anyway, I mostly just avoid them. Sometimes the woman stares at me, but I just ignore her. Until recently, I've been mostly successful. Here's the creepy story. I don't sleep well at night when I'm home alone, and I'm always home alone now because my boyfriend is out of the country on business for months at a time. I often feel like there's someone just outside my house or at my door. Sometimes my dogs act up at odd hours, but I never see anyone. I keep my house alarm armed and a pistol in my nightstand. The other night was one such night. I didn't sleep well and kept having a sinking feeling that something was wrong. Anyway, I got out of bed at 2 a.m. because I thought I was scheduled to work at 3 a.m. I had mostly given up on getting a restful sleep then anyway. As I left my house, I heard something to my left, the direction of my neighbor's house, but didn't see anything. I was always nervous in my driveway because the motion sensor light was broken and there was always a lot of darkness between my door and my truck, so I always moved quickly in my driveway. I got in my truck and went to work. It turned out that I misread my schedule and didn't work at 3 in the morning after all. Annoyed at that mistake, but grateful I'd get to go home and sleep a little more before the actual start of my shift at 7, I went home. I pulled into my driveway and didn't see anything in the beam of my truck's headlights. I turned the headlight off and got out. I took a few steps ahead of my truck. A large man called out to me from the shadows at the corner of my house. He scared the living crap out of me so bad that I screamed, reached for my pepper spray, and fell down. He apologized in a tone that didn't sound sorry at all. It was my neighbor, and that wasn't much of a relief. Apparently, it was my fault that he occasionally found trash in his yard in windy Colorado. Complaining about this seemed to be more important than scaring the hell out of a woman alone at night. He showed no real concern or realization that that was even wrong at all. Again, I have no problems with neighbors bringing issues to my attention, but seriously, hey, can you make sure the trash from your bins isn't blowing into my yard? Okay, thanks, bye. It's not a statement that takes 10 freaking minutes, nor is it one that needs to be addressed at 3 in the freaking morning. I nod in agreement to keep the peace, but I know the trash isn't mine. We live in a windy area. Trash gets blown around people's yards all the time. No big deal. He kept needlessly repeating himself. It made some not quite but kind of threat about getting along. He was keeping me busy. I didn't even notice his wife flank me before I even knew she was there. She appeared from the shadows by a tree. She wanted to yell at me about some eggs. A few weeks ago, I found a bunch of eggs smashed on the road near a shared mailbox. As the carton was right next to them, I thought the carton had obviously just been dropped. Not that someone was trying to egg anything. I assumed my neighbor had dropped the eggs on her way to get the mail and just left them. But I didn't care enough to say anything to her about it at the time, so I just let it go and forgot all about it. Now she was accusing me of leaving eggs around again, inexplicably expressing the grievance at 3 a.m. Weird that she hadn't brought it up weeks ago when it happened, but I know why she didn't. My boyfriend was still here then. My boyfriend had been away on business for several weeks now, long enough for them to have noticed his absence. They were also probably aware that my motion sensor light was out. They sure seemed to know how to avoid my headlight beams. Sure, it could be a coincidence, but did I mention this was all after 3 a.m.? Not some other dark yet reasonable time for a person to be outside. Being surprisingly patient, I explained that I knew nothing about the eggs. I mentioned that later I found a lot of shells in my yard, and figured a squirrel must have carried them there. She profoundly informed me that she tossed them onto my yard herself. Apparently she thought that was okay, but someone dropping them in the first place isn't. Anyway, this is where I started to get over my shock a bit and started getting pissed. Initially, I had been somewhat relieved that the man in the shadows had been my neighbor, not some crazy person, but now I was pissed. I had now been outside with them for something like 20 minutes, while they accosted me about stupid crap, while I tried to be polite and agreeable even though I had nothing to do with it. But now everything wrong with the situation had kicked in. I eventually remembered that I don't actually have to put up with any of this. I cut her off mid-rant and said, "It's 3 a.m. I'm going home. Good night," and turned on my heel. I heard her say something in an unkind tone as I left, but didn't catch what it was. They had staked out my house, waited for my boyfriend to leave, and long enough to be sure he was gone, all to complain about some inane crap long after it supposedly even happened. If they have concerns, surely there are better times to address it than at 3 a.m. What the hell are they doing out at 3 a.m. anyways? And that man had totally purposely hidden the shadow at the corner of my house, where he could avoid my headlights, and didn't even reveal himself until I was out of my truck and exposed. And shouldn't the woman have walked up beside her husband, not gone around while I was distracted? They keep doing odd behavior, never enough that they're doing anything illegal or anything to report to the police, but none of this is normal. Honestly, I think these complaints are just excuses, and they're really just taking the opportunity to intimidate me. I think they're messing with me on purpose. Then again, I could be wrong. They could just be weird and incredibly socially inept, but otherwise harmless. Either way, I'll be installing a motion light soon. I was so shaken up and had my adrenaline so high that I didn't even get any sleep before work. Because seriously, that could have been someone else, and a lot worse. We've gone through a lot of stories about neighbors who don't get along, and these type of half threats and petty grudges are not uncommon. What's weird is the timing. It could be that the neighbors just happen to be awake at the same time, but these sort of complaints aren't something to pursue at that hour. Many other commenters on this post had the same general idea, and instructed the OP to begin recording whenever something like this happens. If I were you, I would record video every time you are outside, or at least have your phone in your pocket so that the audio is being recorded. That way you can have proof for your boyfriend, and for the cops should it get to that point. I would have called the cops that night. To be honest, someone sneaking up on you like that in the middle of the night is more than just socially inept. I would have called the cops, but they weren't technically on my property. My driveway is on the far side of my property, right up next to the property line. That's how they could have been at the corner of my house, but not actually trespassing, and they were right on that line. And yeah, I'm actually planning to install security cameras as soon as I have the funds. I'm nervous enough being home alone without my neighbors pulling crap like this. I need to record around my house. Helen would reply to some comments here and there in between posting, but we wouldn't get a full update post until 4 months later, on November 22nd. So I posted about my creepy neighbors lurking in the dark before. For anyone who doesn't feel like reading it, basically my neighbors, a husband and wife, have been sort of harassing me for some time, but not in a way I could really do much about, leaving rude notes in my mailbox, blocking my driveway with their vehicle as soon as I get home, and then shouting abuse, that sort of thing. In the encounter I wrote about the pair waiting for me at 3 a.m., lurking in the darkness, and basically ambushed me when I got home to complain about some inane shit that I had nothing to do with. Since then, they've amped up the aggression. Right out the harassing neighbor's handbook, they've started wasting police time, calling in with fake noise complaints, or reporting my dogs as unlicensed and unvaccinated. To be fair, I had been puppy sitting a friend's dog who would occasionally yap at a squirrel, upon which I'd immediately let him in, but that dog has been gone for some time now. Once while letting the dog in at the first park, the man stuck his head out of the window to scream at me to bring the dog inside, something I was obviously already doing, and he kept screaming and screaming. Hilariously, as he was screaming, he called 7 a.m. an ungodly hour. 7 a.m. is past city noise ordinance hours. If his goal was quiet, he failed. But I suspect his goal wasn't quiet. He just wanted an excuse. I simply asked him, "Is this how adults behave?" and went inside. This was the last time I ever said a word to either of them. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure he watches me from the window whenever I'm outside, just looking for any excuse to scream and hurl insults. Recently, I've been outside with my dogs whenever they're outside. I know for a fact that they haven't made a single peep, and yet I still get aggression from them. It's only me they bother. They never said a word to my 6'3" muscle-bound boyfriend, nor anything to me when he's around. Once while I was getting the mail, the woman saw me out her window, left the house, and started stomping towards me. I braced myself for some abuse. Then she noticed my boyfriend was waiting at the car next to me, stopped dead, and pretended to be getting the mail herself. My boyfriend leaves the country now and then for work, and it seems that my neighbors are watching. They usually wait a few days to be sure he's gone. What makes me write today is that they've stopped even bothering to make up excuses. They've apparently learned my schedule and now wait for me at night quite regularly. More than once, I've caught them lurking in the dark. Sometimes I'll be putting out the trash at night, only to see the woman stalking towards me out of the darkness. When I see her coming towards me, I abandon my task, go back inside and wait for her to leave. Last night when I arrived home, the man was waiting for me in the dark. I never saw him, but I heard him. As soon as I got out of my car, he shouted like he was talking to someone else. My neighbor Helen is a... And then what followed was a string of insults that continued until I got into my house. I don't know where he was in the darkness, or if there was actually someone with him, but there are enough lights outside that he would have had to be deliberately avoiding them to be unseen. You know that thing little kids do when someone they don't like is around? When they turn to their friend and start trash talking that person, as if that's what they've been doing all along, and the unliked kid isn't even there but do it loud enough to be heard? It's like that. I only heard his voice. I'm not sure if there was really a second person in the dark with him, or if he was alone just pretending to talk to someone else. I'm not sure which is creepier. When I went inside, I grabbed my pepper spray and stepped back outside with my phone, ready to record, but it seems he was gone. To me, this means he really was lurking outside just to wait for me. I should say that I have not spoken a single word to these people since the last time I rode here. I have no idea what their problem is. Seriously, the last time I had anything to do with either of them at all was earlier this week, when I heard a car stuck in the snow on the unplowed road in front of my house, and stepped outside to push the stranger's car free. The neighbor woman happened to come outside during this. I never said a word to her as we pushed the car free. They don't even seem to be looking for excuses or making up things to complain about anymore. Now it's lurking outside the house in the dark just to harass me. I'm documenting all this and plan to get a restraining order or something as soon as I get some proof. I'm definitely getting a security camera as soon as I can afford one. Last week, the front tire on my truck, on the side their house is on, had a flat right before a big blizzard hit. I ended up having to replace the 2 front tires. Now these tires were needing to be replaced anyways, and I couldn't see any obvious puncture on the flat one, but a part of me wonders if it was really just a coincidence. It would be an easy target for neighbors lurking in the dark between houses. I've started sleeping with a pistol on my nightstand again. This is how Helen closed off her second post. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with having a pistol by your nightstand, but what makes it ominous is knowing who you might have to use it on. And what's even worse is that they live next door. The commenters under here would have the same general idea. Don't wait for proof. Your word is a form of proof. Every time they harass you, report it to the cops. You want to develop as much of a paper trail as possible to make it easier for them to get something done. You might also want to install a camera around your house somewhere where they won't see it, and try to catch what they're doing. I'm sorry you're dealing with this though. Also, you probably want to tell some people about this, especially at your work. I don't mean ask for help or advice, but just like, at least mention around the office in a conversation. Oh yeah, my crazy neighbors have been harassing me, haha. But seriously, it's messed up. I say this because it's completely possible, since you're dealing with obsessive sociopaths, that they want to hurt you. That they could try to get you fired by concocting some story and approaching your employer with it. And if they can fool your boyfriend, your boss should be a lot easier. This comes off a lot as textbook gaslighting. They want to make you feel and look crazy by putting on a completely different face for your boyfriend as for you. Helen did reply back to recreational. In fact, it was minutes after getting off the phone with 911. Thanks. I actually just got done speaking with the police a few minutes ago. You're right. It's good to get records going. The police also advised cameras. I hope to get some soon. Good call letting my work know. I told my supervisor about the last incident. I will be sure to tell him about this one as well. I'm not sure if they know where I work, but they do see me in uniform regularly, so they might figure it out. I think you're right about my boyfriend. He really didn't believe me early on. He does now, thankfully. I didn't even think that it was just gaslighting to make me look crazy. I thought it was just the fear of my big burly boyfriend, but now that you mention it, it makes a lot of sense. After this comment, Helen did update the post and gave more information on how her interaction with the police went. Update: the police came and talked to me. They seemed sympathetic and said they'd file a report, but didn't seem to write much down. Maybe they didn't really need to. Or maybe it just prattled on a bit and gave more information than what they actually needed. I feel like such a baby explaining what happened. Even just talking about it raises my anxiety sky high. I'm pretty sure I was shaking. I don't think they just take one side of the story as gospel, but I do think they can see that I feel very unsafe in my own home now because of this. Unfortunately, as it's so late, we had agreed that it was best to not go and talk to the neighbors tonight, as they would surely complain about the late visit and possibly want to retaliate even more. The police told me the documentation is helpful, so it was a good thing that I called them, as now we have ongoing records being collected. But not much else can be done as far as charges go, until I get something recorded. They told me what I'd need for harassment charges and what I need for a restraining order. Also, they advised me that I should install security cameras and record on my phone when I can. They even told me that I could legally use my phone to record them on their own property if they're presently harassing. Thanks to everyone here for your support. Hopefully I won't have to post a third installment, but we'll see, I guess. In similar situations, the police have been known to be unhelpful, but luckily for Helen, the police seem to at least be listening to her, despite not being able to do anything as of right now. If the neighbors were watching Helen, then we can assume that they saw the police come to Helen's home, but this wouldn't seem to faze them, because Helen's next post was uploaded only 1 month later. Real quick, this is happening now. The police are at their house talking to them. For info, check my previous post. After a short period of calm, my neighbors have gone back to lurking in the dark when I get home and screaming abuse. Last time the cops couldn't do anything, but this time I got it on video. The man even repeated my name after he noticed I was recording. The police came quick and are talking to them now. I'll add updates within the hour in the video as soon as I can censor my name. Okay, here's the story. Apparently the lady next door, whose episodes I've written about before, has somehow become convinced that her husband is cheating with me. Apparently there are certain people out there who just love slinging around random accusations. Seriously, I don't even know this guy's name and struggle to even describe him to the police. And this man's way of disproving the accusations, waiting for me to come home and shouting insults about me, while alternating between loudly worshipping his wife's beauty and also calling her a bitch. Anyway, I got home a little after 11 p.m. and was taking out the trash when the wife shouted at me, "You playing a game?" Which she has done before when she wanted to cause trouble. That's when I started recording. From that point, it was mostly the man yelling. They've done this a few times since my last update, and were even bold enough to do it during the day. But they didn't say my name and the audio quality was poor, so I didn't do anything with it. Things have calmed down recently, so I thought they were done, and tonight they started up again. When I pulled my phone out, the wife was taunting me. Something like, "Yeah, start recording, bitch," which I'm not sure if I got on video or not. The wife also told me I need to move out of my house. As for the man, it was mostly a string of insults, how I'm an ugly psycho cunt and so on. I did not say a single word to them, not one. They went inside and I put my phone to my ear. Suddenly not so bold anymore after they realized I was on the phone with the police. So they came, watched my videos, and talked to them. When the police returned, they said the couple was still being belligerent when they went there, and that the couple was shocked that they could actually be arrested for this behavior. The neighbor tried to turn it into a complaint about my dogs, but the police weren't having it. Before the police arrived, they read the report from the previous officers that came out, so they knew these people only acted up when my boyfriend wasn't around. They also claimed my dogs acted differently when my boyfriend is around somehow. Anyway, it didn't work. As for the videos, I have Adobe Premiere, but I'm not that familiar with it. I don't know how to edit out my information, but as soon as I do, I'll post it. Despite providing a link to the video, it appeared to be private, and I was unable to find any version of it online. It's likely that the OP took it down due to their information being in it, but from the looks of it, commenters who watched the video generally had the same idea about the neighbors and why they may act the way they do. The paranoia, late hours, and erratic behavior makes me think these two are using crystal meth. Edit: do they look like meth users? Bad teeth, pale skin, sores, and circles around their eyes? I agree. Couples on meth tend to be completely jealous, erratic, and insane. I've seen it firsthand. It's not pretty. The fact they seem to only come out at night only verifies our suspicion. People on meth don't sleep a lot and are known to stay awake for nights on end, which eventually causes psychosis. Evidently, it seems to already be occurring. Maybe. I mostly don't see them. They come out more at night. During the day, I rarely see them, let alone close enough to get a good look. I can't speak for what the couple might look like since I haven't seen the video, but from what Helen has told us about the neighbor's behavior and the comments under the post, I am beginning to think that drugs may play a key role in all this. Helen would close this post off with a short and somewhat morbid update. Small update. I talked to the people at my work. I told them that if I ever don't show up for a shift and can't be reached by phone, the police are to be called to my house immediately. Both my supervisor and manager now want me to check in with them by text on my days off. My supervisor will be escorting me home and would like to show up at my house periodically, just to let the neighbors know someone's around. At this point, Helen has been giving us monthly updates on the 22nd of each month, and this would be the third month in a row, in January of 2016. Okay, so a few things have happened. None were really worth an update on their own, but I feel like I have enough now. My coworkers have been following me home from work most days. My neighbors, I'm pretty sure, have been waiting for me, as I don't get home until late, and their lights are always on in one room in their house, the room that overlooks my driveway. But with a witness escorting me, the neighbors have stayed quiet for the last few weeks. The woman occasionally comes outside when she notices me out front, but I'm not out there much, so she usually doesn't come out in time. Once while I was in my garage doing some minor work on my car, I heard some rustling just on the side of my garage door. I knew the woman was out there, so I just closed the garage door. Another time she came out while I was moving some bins. She muttered something, and I know she was talking to me as we were the only ones out there, but I didn't hear what she said and didn't care much. I just ignored her. I can't always get escorted at night. After a few nights of having no escort, I think they caught on to the pattern. I came home one night and they had the garage door open, which they do when they're waiting to harass me. Unfortunately for them, I was delayed. Unfortunately for them, I was delayed and didn't get home until midnight, and they weren't out there anymore. Anyway, I figured I should probably know what these people's names are and what they look like, so I did a public record search on their address. The woman came up with 3 last names, so it seems she's been married and divorced before. I went looking for these people on Facebook just so that I could verify I was getting the correct people. The man didn't seem to have an account, but the woman did, and when I checked her page, I found this. Helen provided a screenshot of her neighbor's Facebook, who we now know is named Lisa. I was going to read it, but due to it being so vulgar and insulting, I figured it would just be better to not put it in the video. So if you would like to read it for yourself, feel free to pause the video. In the screenshot, we see multiple posts, ranging from September 21st to October 27th, though we can likely assume there are many more. In practically every post, she's insulting Helen, claiming that she wants her to stumble upon her Facebook and read all of this. I guess luckily for Lisa, Helen did. The post continued. These comments are below a picture she posted of the Chucky doll and the bride of Chucky doll. So when she says the one on the left, that's what she means. I don't know why she's convinced I'm the psycho one. Seriously, I don't say or do anything to these people. I'm not the one lurking in the dark, screaming insults, or posting crazy online, making vague threats about how things were done back in the day. Notice the date? She's not only writing about me being nosy, but also seems paranoid that I was stalking her on Facebook, even though I never looked her up until just a few weeks ago. She seems way too convinced that people are interested in their lives. I wouldn't even care that they existed if they weren't causing me problems. So now I am watching her Facebook. I don't want to. I really don't care about this person. But now I have to check periodically just in case she posts something else about me. So maybe I can get an early warning if she's planning to attack or something. And I have to be ready to screenshot anything incriminating before it gets taken down. This annoys me almost as much as the harassment. I don't want to waste my time having to keep tabs on the social media of someone I'd rather just pretend doesn't exist. I hate that she is making me waste my time and attention on her. I'll send no friend requests to her or anyone she knows. I'll send no messages to her or anyone she knows. I'll make no tagging to her or anyone she knows. I'll have no contact. But as long as it's public, I'm gonna keep an eye on it, and just wish I didn't have to. Anyway, the reason I'm writing today is because they're adjusting their tactics. After some silence since the last lecture from the police, they've decided they want to stay off camera. Today, I stepped out of my house and went to my mailbox. I heard some noise from inside their house, but I didn't care much. I figured they were just bickering amongst themselves. Then I heard the woman loudly say something to the effect of, "She's right out there, do it," followed immediately by the man shouting out the window, "Hey fucking cunt, fuck off," which was obviously directed at me. Why even do that? I hadn't done anything. I'd asked what their problem is, but I really don't care. Unfortunately, as they weren't outside, I wasn't recording. And for the first time in a long time, I responded. I simply said this, "How badly do you want a restraining order?" Funny enough, I didn't get a response. Then I got in my car and left for work, where I am now. I'm sick of calling the police. I'm going to the station tomorrow and filing a formal complaint. This is where Helen's monthly update streak ended, because the next update came 2 months later, on March 28th of 2016. Helen stated that her husband came home, and as she said in some of her previous posts, him being there deters the neighbors from harassing her, and the frequency of her posting lines up with her story so far. Shortly after my last update, my boyfriend came home from Afghanistan, and what do you know? My neighbor shut the fuck up. A few times, I found a woman lurking outside, very near the property line, just staring at me as she does. I'd see her doing this as I would pull into my driveway. I'd get out and she'd stare. But then my boyfriend got out of the car too, and she turned right around and walked away. But now he's gone again. It took the neighbors a few weeks, but they did notice. March 6, 2016. Sometime after 11 p.m., I just got home from work. I was driving my boyfriend's car that night, and I pulled it straight into the garage and immediately shut the garage door behind me. I didn't see them outside when I pulled onto my property, but as soon as I got out of my car, I heard him. He was screaming his random insults again. I can't 100% be sure, but I thought he sounded like he was standing in my driveway just on the other side of my garage door. I didn't say anything. I just went in the door that connects my garage to my house. A little while later, I went outside. The guy only comes out for me, and he probably figured I was in for the night, so I reckoned the coast was clear enough for me to get my mail and take out my trash. Nope. The man and woman both come out hooting and hollering. The usual insults, telling me that I'm somehow the psycho one, and telling me to move. I tell them that I have more than enough evidence to press charges. The man says he doesn't care, but quickly retreats inside when I demand to know if he was on my property. He wouldn't answer that on camera. Anyone who remembers the previous video knows that these people just scream insults, and don't seem to have any particular complaint, and apparently the cops told them off for it. So now they think they can get away with their crazy harassment if somewhere in there they throw in a complaint, if only to have it on video regardless of how untrue it is. Recently they've now accused me of revving my engine. Obviously I wasn't. March 24th. This one I do have a good video of to show you. It was 1 a.m. and I was asleep. The doorbell rang, my dogs went nuts. Now, we just had a bad snowstorm, so I thought maybe it was someone who got their car stuck in the street out front and needed some help. It has happened before. Still, I wasn't dumb enough to just open the door. Instead, I opened my second-story window, and it's a good thing. The man was out there, ranting and raving away. He started his nonsense by claiming he didn't want to go to jail, even though he was doing the exact thing he was warned would land him in jail, and now on my property doing it. He called me a psycho and ugly and so on, and since he was being recorded, a bullshit complaint. Apparently, I'm revving my engine, despite being asleep in bed. He never knew I had a pistol in my hand. It was out of sight. I wasn't threatening him with it, pointing it at him, or showing it to him. But I had it. I was hoping he wouldn't try to break in, but I was ready if he did. Luckily, and I'll let you decide who it was lucky for, he left when ordered to. I went down to the courthouse for a restraining order this morning. They told me to come back tomorrow. Unfortunately, like the previous one, this video was also private, but Helen would add 2 edits to the post with more information. Oh, I forgot to add that I finally got security cameras. I set them up today. I'm going to have to redo them as I'm not entirely happy with their placement, but this will do for now. Edit, April 6th of 2016, $300 later, I now have a temporary restraining order against both of them. We all 3 have to appear in court for the permanent restraining order in 2 weeks. I saw the women getting served with the papers today, just as I was leaving for work. Not sure what to expect when I get home. I have all my evidence put together to show the judge. I wonder what the neighbors will say in their defense. I'm going to read the next 2 parts back to back, because they were posted only a few weeks apart from each other. Okay, it has been a while since I last updated. Since the last incident I wrote about in the previous update back in March, I've installed security cameras around my home. April 5th of 2016. I got approved for a temporary restraining order against both neighbors. The county did not make it easy. I had to be at the courthouse early and fill out paperwork. I had to do separate paperwork for both of them. I couldn't write both of their names on the same form, and it all has to be complete and filed by 9 a.m. or you won't be seen. And as for the filing, it's not free, and I had to pay for both. Eventually, everyone petitioning for a restraining order that day all went into the same courtroom and were all called before the judge one at a time. Some people got their restraining orders approved, others didn't. It was heartbreaking seeing an elderly blind woman be denied. It's hard for someone who can't see to provide evidence. Not that evidence was presented at the time, mind you. Thankfully, the judge approved me for a restraining order against both of them. I was really worried that I would get the restraining order against the male, but not the female, and she would retaliate. Then I had to pay again to get the restraining orders served, and it all cost me $300. Now, this was just a temporary restraining order. It's only good for 2 weeks. And 2 weeks from when it's filed, the case for the permanent restraining order is held, to which the defendants must attend or they'll automatically lose. April 6, 2016. Just as I was leaving for work, I saw the woman being served. She looked irate, but I wasn't getting in that. I thanked the serving officer as he left. I received proof of service the next day. April 11th, 2016. When I got home from work a little bit after 11, the garage door was open and the woman was sitting on the chair in her driveway, apparently waiting for me. When I parked and got out of my truck, she went into the garage. They weren't leaving me alone though. They were doing it so they'd be out of sight and not on video. The male from inside his garage started with his usual harassment. And just to make it perfectly clear, he said my address. I recorded it on my phone, but the quality was poor. Even though I can hear them clear as day hooting and hollering, my phone doesn't pick it up or play it back so well. So the police who I called over didn't have enough to go on to bring them in on the restraining order violation. April 19th of 2016. This was today. I arrived at court early in the morning. I just barely made it on time due to weather and traffic. Quite a few people were late. My neighbors were late. I had been hoping they just wouldn't show. So what happens when going for a restraining order is this. Everyone filing for a restraining order on that day, and every defendant, is all in the same courtroom. Cases get called one at a time. First, the judge goes over who is who, clarifies a few things, decides whether or not he or she will even allow there to be a case for the restraining order, then asks the defendants if they'd like to contest the case. If the defendant contests it, there will be a hearing. This is where both parties present their facts and evidence. If the defendant does not contest this, there is no hearing and the restraining order is simply granted. In my case, both my neighbors declined to contest, and the restraining order was granted. But don't let that make you think these people are being normal and sane. Oh no. When asked if they had any questions, they asked the judge if they could count a restraining order. That is, have a restraining order against me. I managed not to laugh. I was already never on their property and never contacting them. They were just doing it out of spite. The male did try to say I was a danger because I had a gun around his wife. Odd, since for that to be true, his wife would have had to be trespassing on my property at the same time he was. If you've seen my previous update, you already know what this is about. The male was at my house at around 1 a.m. at my door, hooting and hollering, being all hostile, telling me to die, and I was armed as I expected him to break in. He didn't know that though. I didn't show my weapon, mention it, or allude to it in any way. The only way he knows about this is because the fact I possess it was written on my formal complaint, by me. This weapon, by the way, is perfectly legal for me to own. The judge pretty much blew him off. She said if he wants a restraining order, he can go through the application process just like I did. If he does, he'll be wasting his money. Oh, and at one point while talking to the judge, the woman referred to me as it. Lovely people. We speculated a bit here about drugs and alcohol being involved, but just looking at how they behaved in court while presumably sober makes me believe that this is really just who these people are as people, substances or not. I was 10,000% ready to go. I had copies of all my police reports. I had all the videos on my laptop to play all nice and loud. There was no way they could have really defended their actions, so they declined to contest the charges, and I got the restraining order against them both. Basically, they're not allowed to contact me or be on my property, and they must maintain a certain distance from me, except when they're at their home, because they live there and the judge wasn't going to make them move. Given how they behaved in court, still irrational and unrepentant, I believe it's only a matter of time before they violate the permanent restraining order. Who wants to start a pool? Anyways, that's it for now. After I left the courtroom, I went to a nearby bench to organize my backpack and get on my phone. While I was doing that, the neighbors left the courtroom. They were muttering something in an unkind tone, but I didn't catch it. I waited for them to go down the elevators before I even tried to use them myself, as I wanted distance. As I was going down, I met a nice lawyer. He had to drop off a paper downstairs real quick, but agreed to walk me to my car in the nearby parking garage afterwards. Nice man. It's good to know that there are some decent people out there still. Afterwards, I went to the copy shop and got copies of my restraining order made. Then I went to the mall. I wasn't shopping. I just wanted to pace around, talk to my mom on the phone, and blow off steam. Even though it all went my way, it's still a very stressful experience to deal with. If these people didn't know where I worked before, they do now, as it's on the paperwork that they got. So I dropped off my copy of the restraining order with my boss on the way home. He was also able to get a photo of them off their Facebook. So my boss is going to put together bolo flyers for the security guards to watch out for these people. I need a nap. I want to think this is the end, but I really doubt it is. It's only a matter of time before they start testing the limits of the restraining order, looking for loopholes and eventually escalating. I've got my guard up. If it ever gets to the point where I have to defend myself, at least I can say I did everything legal and peaceful to prevent it from ever getting that far. The rest is up for them now. Thanks for listening. This may be my last update. Okay, so it hasn't quite been a month since I got the restraining order. They've been pushing it. One morning while I was leaving for work, the woman came out. She was out with her dog as an apparent excuse. She was staring at me the whole time, body facing me. She started walking towards the property line and towards my car when I got in it. Then as I backed out, she suddenly needed to be at the mailbox, right where my car was now. I drove away. She was trying to get as close as she could get. The whole time she was in nothing but her underwear. The next day I didn't work. I went outside early to put my bins out while still wearing my pajamas. She came out and made an obvious fake and loud laugh. Restraining order doesn't block laughing. She was trying to provoke me into saying something. Anyways, I found it amusing that she would fake laugh at me for being in my pajamas when she couldn't be bothered to put pants on just the day before. May 11th. I let my dogs out around 9 a.m. As soon as they start barking, I open the door to let them in. Now my back door is a sliding door, so I could not be seen. And yet as soon as I opened the door, the neighbor guy was screaming his head off at me. I wonder if he thinks I can hear him from inside my house with the door closed. I can't imagine the point of yelling at someone to let their dogs in, when that's clearly what they're already doing. But he's not very bright. My dog's barking may have been the reason for his yelling, or his yelling may have been the reason for the barking. I would not be surprised if he intentionally provoked my dogs just to have an excuse to yell. That's a violation of the restraining order, but I didn't let him see me. As far as he knows, I never hurt him. I decided to keep it that way. Anyway, while I'm sure what he said had something to do with the insults directed at me and my dogs, I for some reason decided that it sounded an awful lot like, "Hey, now would be a great time to go mow your lawn." So I did. I'm sure he loved that. I'm sure he also loved that I did it with my headphones on and never once looked towards their house. Yes, I admit I enjoyed some petty revenge. By then it was about 10 a.m., well past when any reasonable person would expect quiet. But these aren't reasonable people. And as satisfying as it was to run my mower and completely ignore the impotent rage while having all the laws on my side, I did worry somewhat about retaliation, so I remained armed the whole time. Later, after I finished mowing, I intended to do some yard work out front. Once I rounded the corner of my house just as their van was pulling out of their driveway, they honked. I'm sure they yelled too, but I had my headphones on. I kept an eye on them in my peripheral vision, but never looked in their direction or responded at all. As far as they know, I never even noticed them. I'm not stupid though, and I rounded back around my house and out of sight. Now I could report the restraining order violations, but these being relatively minor, I don't imagine much would come of it. But there is something incredibly satisfying about just knowing that they're raging over me, not just not responding to them, but not even acknowledging them. May 12th, the next day, I saw the for sale sign in front of their home. I'm so happy. However, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to pull something just as they were leaving, like disgruntled employees do on their last day, so I'm not letting my guard down. And I'm keeping those security cameras rolling. If anything else does happen, I'll be writing here again. But apart from that, it looks like this is finally ending. Unless they do something else before they move. This will probably be my last post on the topic. It's not a very climactic end, but I'm happy that peace and quiet are finally within sight. I'm considering whether or not I should check public records after they move and pass along my contact information to the next neighbor, just in case they ever have problems and need help with someone who has dealt with these people before. But I'm not sure if that could get me in trouble. Thanks to everyone who's been reading and giving me advice. Your support and advice helped me out a lot. I might not have ever gone to the police if it wasn't for this sub. Thank you. And finally, despite them testing the restraining order, the OP was able to find some relief knowing that the neighbors were going to sell their home soon, which would be a somewhat okay conclusion to the story. But in the months leading up to the sale, it became clear that they were not finished with Helen, because Helen would come back with one last and final update. Wow, okay, this actually happened like a week ago, but I've been too busy to post. June 4th of 2016, so these people have been pushing the limits of the restraining order and occasionally outright violating it pretty much since they got it, but since they're moving, I've mostly ignored it. But one day I pulled into my garage after 11 p.m, and of course they're out there screaming their usual shit, the exact thing that got them into trouble in the first place. They stalk me, learn my schedule, and wait, lurking in the dark for me to get home. They shout their abuse, insults, threats, and so on, and they have been warned time and time again that it would land them in jail, and I've had it. I asked them, "Do you want to go to jail?" There was a stunned silence. That was not a rhetorical question. Anyways, they keep up with their insults, but I keep cutting them off. I tell them that they're violating the restraining order. I tell them that the only reason they weren't in jail already is because I'm so nice to them, which they don't seem to get. I could have gone far further than a restraining order. I could press criminal charges. I could sue them. And even if they move out of state, I could drag them all the way back to Colorado court. I tell them that I don't have to be so nice and don't have to keep giving them chances. I tell them that if they want to avoid jail, they need to shut up and go inside, and preferably, seek counseling and rehab. They stammer a bit and tell me to mind my own business. Really, they harass me but tell me to mind my own business? That's a laugh. Yes, I know I broke my rule, but I was just beyond pissed, and I figured I had all the power legally anyway. I considered calling the cops that night, but it was late and I had to go back to work in 8 hours, so I just went to bed. About an hour later, the doorbell rings. At first, I thought it was them, since the guy had pulled that shit at 1 a.m. before. When I saw it was the cops, I put the gun away. Yeah, they called the cops. I shit you not. They called the cops on themselves. It's not even possible for me to be nice to them. They'll just screw themselves over. So they get in trouble for violating the restraining order, and the woman got arrested. I don't know why only the woman was arrested, even though they were both doing that shit, but whatever. I knew she was held overnight because the cops called me to let me know the next day. As for me, I got in no trouble whatsoever, of course, because I did nothing wrong. I don't know what they even thought they were calling the cops for. I seriously can't stop laughing that they did this shit to themselves. That's what gets me. I didn't even call the cops. All the neighbors had to do was nothing, and they would have been fine. But if these people had any sense about them, this situation wouldn't exist in the first place. So that was pretty funny. Oh, and for anyone wondering, yes, I did stay up and watch her get put in the squad car from my window. And yes, it was satisfying. Considering their escalation since the restraining order, I think they would have done more eventually if left unchecked. Maybe the arrest will be the rolled up newspaper to the snout needed to get them back in line long enough to move. Update June 14th, 2016. Animal control showed up at my door about a barking complaint this morning. Guess who called? Even on the warning it says my dog was outside for a grand total of 10 minutes. I always bring in my dog when she barks. The animal control officer seemed apologetic. He knows what's up. He says he gets called out for bogus complaints all the time. I told him all about the restraining order, the arrest last week, and pointed to my security cameras and explained the incidents that led to them. He still had to give me a warning, but said it basically doesn't mean anything. The neighbors would have to prove a nuisance barking for anything to actually come of it. He actually laughed when he explained that within 72 hours of a warning, no further action could be taken. So if I wanted to, I could leave my dogs out and let them bark all day. I think he's sick of people using animal control as a way to harass as well. I'm not going to do that, but it's tempting. I think the woman was outside when animal control was at the door. I think she was looking forward to seeing me in trouble. She went inside real quick when it was clear that the animal control officer and I were getting along fine, and that I was in no trouble whatsoever. Funny how shouting harassments in the middle of the night is perfectly okay in their book, but a dog barking once or twice in the middle of the day? Oh no, we can't have that now, can we? Edit. I forgot to mention earlier, but my boyfriend is coming home today, so I should at least have a month of relative peace. And this was Helen's final post about her neighbors who lurk in the dark. One thing I have to say is that Helen is extremely patient, despite having had the ability to send her neighbors to jail for quite some time. Thankfully, Helen would add one last update to the post, giving us our final conclusion to the story. Edit. Out with the old and in with the new. The old neighbors are gone and the new ones are in, and it's a welcome change. I have not met them all yet, but I have met the man, and I see that he has his own dogs, which he actually lets in his backyard. He seems friendly. I saw him the other night playing Pokemon Go, walking down the sidewalk carrying his phone and a nice drink. He stopped to talk a bit. Apparently he had heard how horrible the previous neighbors were from elsewhere. He seems sympathetic. Hopefully we'll continue to get along. I've never had a problem with neighbors in my life before those people, and I know that they must be rare, but still, I can't help but feel a bit guarded. Thanks to everyone for listening. That's all for this video. I'd like to give a special thanks to the Cold Crew members who helped make this video possible. You can also directly help support the channel by becoming a member yourself, or by simply subscribing and leaving a like. Let me know if you've had neighbors like these in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.